Today is a story of 3 Rosses and 2 Rick Rosses. Rick Ross the big drug dealer and Rick Ross the big fake drug dealer. No, wait, that doesn't work. Fake big drug dealer? No, today's story is about Freeway Ricky Ross, aka Rick Ross Classic, the infamous American drug trafficker, and Rick Ross, aka Rose, half man, half lemon pepper wing, the former corrections officer turned fat rapper turned pear gobbler turned regular sized rapper. Ricky Donnell Ross was born in 1960. He eventually ended up with the name Freeway Ricky Ross after purchasing several properties alongside the LA Harbor Freeway. Hey, and you didn't see the I-110 suing him for that, did you? But to be fair, Freeway Ricky wasn't always the big-time drug kingpin as we know him today. Apparently as a teen, he had big dreams of being a professional tennis player.
You know, I've been putting all my eggs in the tennis basket, saying, one day I'm gonna go to college and play tennis. And
big dreams apparently skirted when he lost his college scholarship to play tennis after they discovered that he couldn't read or write.
I just found out that tennis wasn't gonna be my way out of the ghetto. When they found out I couldn't read or write, it was like, no way you're going to college here,
And so the failed Floyd Mayweather of professional tennis decided to hit triangle on that career and take up a new profession of carjacking and petty crime. That was Freeway Ricky there telling his story on Fox Soul, a touching interview that seemed to have a hilarious moment where him and the presenter realized that they seemed to grow up around the same set of the Crips.
I was gonna be a Crip.
Right. Hey, Trey Hooverhood?
Wait.
Hey, Trey 741 over
Wait, how do you know about all this?
Man, it's an LA thing. He's an urban legend.
Wow, that's nearly as exciting as when Sean Hannity had Nipsey Hussle on his show, realized that they were in the same set of the Rollin' 60s, and started crip walking all around the set. From there, Freeway Ricky went full OT Genesis and fell in love with the coco.
So when my friend introduced me to cocaine for the first time, I just fell in love with it.
Starting out with a humble 50 sack that he flipped to 100 and continued putting the principles of compound interest to work until he was dealing with straight kilos. Apparently by the time he was 25, he claimed to be making $1 million a day, some days even 3 mil. Basically what I'm trying to say is that his life as a drug kingpin has been well documented, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Freeway Ricky is the real deal. A Wall Street Journal article spilled the beans on his crazy life as a big time drug dealer, apparently describing him as pushing 100 kilos of Nicaraguan blow per day and allegedly raking in over $600 million, which in today's prices would be over $1 billion. Take that, Jay-Z! And story goes, Freeway Ricky was actually something of a Robin Hood figure in his hood. A hood Robin Hood, opting to use his money to help his community before splashing out on jewelry and cars.
Basically what I did with my money is I took my money and I did for the neighborhood what I wish somebody else would have had done for me. And that was creating jobs.
And that's a really nice thing to do for your community, after you've completely destroyed it with huge amounts of drugs. Trap Law Ross.
I sell drugs to the community.
However, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Freeway Rick's cocaine empire would soon crumble like the high-quality Nicaraguan nose beers that he was selling, because he actually ended up getting nicked after trying to buy 100 kilos of blow from an undercover agent in a sting operation. Oh, come on, what kind of sucker gets pinched trying to buy 100 keys from a federal agent? Hey, yo, Hefe, some guy with an earpiece just offered me 100 bricks for the Lolo. No, it's cool. All he wants me to do is go down and meet him by that big white van with a satellite on top of it. Seems kosher to me. Alright, no, I know that his plug flipped on him, but I just thought that was funny. Anyway, upon being caught, Freeway Ricky ended up getting sentenced to 27 years in federal custody, even though he'd cooperated following his arrest and exposed several dirty cops that he'd dealt with. And when he was eventually released around 2009, he set out with good intentions trying to help youngsters stay away from street life. I assume by telling them not to buy bricks from guys wearing one of these. But to be fair to him, it sounded like he'd really used that time in jail to turn his life around, overcoming his illiteracy and planning when he got out to use a theater that he'd bought with drug money to turn into a community center. But unfortunately, Freeway Ricky was broke. But lucky for him, while sitting in jail around 2006, he spotted that there seemed to be another chap running around calling himself Rick Ross. And so by 2010, fresh out of jail, Freeway Ricky was rubbing his hands together like Birdman, ready to hit a lick on Rose, the other Rick Ross. So now we get to Rick Ross, aka Rose, aka Rick Ross 2.0, bigger, fatter, and uncut. Now, I shan't bore you with too many details about Rose, his come up, or the development of his persona in this video, but if you do actually want an in-depth look at Rose's career and how he developed his persona, I would definitely recommend you go and check out his autobiography, Hurricanes, which is also available on Audible, I might add, even though they're not sponsoring this video. Shout out to Audible. Or if you're literally too lazy to even listen to a book, just DM me at TrapLawRoss on Instagram, if you want me to do another video about Rick Ross's supposed fake drug dealing past. Anywho, regardless of what you think about Rose's past as a corrections officer or having been supposedly involved in a drug dealing operation, it's actually his rap career that's truly relevant to this story. In 2006, Rick Ross was riding high off of the release of his smash hit album Port of Miami that ended up going to #1 on the Billboard's album charts, as well as having the banger of a single, Hustlin', Hustlin', Every Day I'm Hustlin', which also hit number 54 on the Billboard chart and went platinum, and it was actually that single that had caught the attention of Jay-Z when he was running Def Jam, landing Rick Ross his multi-million-dollar record deal that this album was released as part of. This was a massive album, and to be fair, pretty much everything on it was about dealing blow. Hell, the follow-up single to Hustlin' was the Scarface sampling single Push It, aka Push It to the Limit, which itself hit number 57 on Billboard and continued to spread the legend that Rose was Rick Ross, the big-time drug-dealing kingpin. And apparently it was around this time, during this meteoric rise to fame, that the Rose Rick Ross came to the attention of Freeway Ricky Ross during a jailhouse book club that he was part of.
I had a book club while I was there, so this youngster brought me a magazine, and they had the guy on there with his mouth open and all these gold chains and a beard, you know, and he was saying that his name was Rick Ross, and I was like, what?
Now, according to the eventual lawsuit, around this time in 2006, Freeway Ricky had actually arranged to send a cease and desist letter to Rose, but this never got a meaningful response. Though, funnily enough, outside of the official court documents, when he was later on running his mouth in interviews, Freeway Ricky had a slightly more expanded explanation, saying that prior to this, they had actually shared a jailhouse phone call that Rose was tricked into taking when he was on a radio interview.
I tried to rap to him, you know, and see where his head was at and see if we could come up with some energies, you know? And he sold me a bunch of lies. And
while that went nowhere, the idea of Rose being under fire for stealing his name and persona started to pick up steam. And eventually Rose did have to speak out and defend himself. Ironically, pulling a sidestep as big as his own fat bloated ass, suggesting that he got the nickname Rick Ross 10 years ago with pretty much no further explanation.
Where you get that name from, man? And are you aware that it's, you know, it's a big drug dealer from out here? Where did you get the name from?
Most definitely. I got on the name like 10 years ago when it wasn't about that. It was about what I was going to turn it into. You know what I'm saying? And that's what it is. Shout out to dude, whatever he doing, but I don't know him.
And this slightly unbelievable story was expanded upon later on in court documents, when Rose inexplicably claimed that Rick Ross was really just an old mispronunciation of a high school nickname, Big Boss, a claim which the Smoking Gun suggested should be worthy of a comedy award. And apparently, Rick Ross actually elaborated further, saying that outside of this mispronunciation of Big Boss as Rick Ross, there was literally no other meaning associated with that name. But hey, I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, my own name comes from a mispronunciation of my old job as a senior manager of a Gap clothing branch. Rose went on to suggest that that jailhouse phone call that he'd had with Freeway Rick was apparently regarding providing some music for some sort of movie that Freeway was having made about his life.
Nah, he wrote me like a letter or two, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, on the first album. So,
no, that's pretty much it. No talking.
Nah, they was talking about doing some movies and you know, that he gonna be doing this thing whenever he jump out, and I told him whatever they needed from me, it's all good.
Oh, okay, so it's all love.
Yeah,
for the
they
most
do
part.
soundtracks, anything, I got them, that's on the house.
Obviously that never happened, and apparently in 2009 when Freeway Ricky got out of jail, he was positively pissed. But more importantly, severely skint. And so here he came, skulking around the big boss Ricky Rose's mansion, looking for free coins. Now, interestingly, to the detriment of his own goddamn case, Freeway Ricky claimed that there were actually 4 rappers that have stolen his name over the years.
It's been 4 rappers to adopt my name in some form.
4 rappers?
Who was that?
Well, you know, we got Freeway from Philly, which is my man, you know.
Okay.
And then we got Freeway Rich from Kansas City,
All right.
who in his own rights have gained some stardom. And we got the Freeway Boys from Cincinnati.
Yeah, so apparently apart from Rick Ross, he also claims to own the rights to the word freeway, despite freeways having been invented in 1908. Specifically, the introduction of the Long Island Motor Parkway, which funnily enough actually inspired the name of Parkway Rose, the most poppin' drill composer of the 1910s.
Yo, it's that Parkway shit, bitch, you get me? Parkway boys up in this bitch, you know what I'm saying? Pulling up with those muskets, baby. F the opposition, you get me? 1910 shit. Pull up on the ops with a musket. Lean out the ride and bust it. You don't want beef with me, old chap. We're the Parkway boys and we're on the map. Skr, skr. That's a bloody large stick. Skr, skr. I'm bloody darn rich. Skr, skr. Leave the op laying dead. Put him in a bloody large dick. Rah!
Anyway, it's fair to say that despite claiming ownership of the word Freeway, the fact is Rick Ross is his real government name and he should be able to exercise some kind of ownership over that, surely. And so on June the 18th, 2010, Freeway Ricky filed a $10 million lawsuit against Ricky Rose for copyright infringement, specifically claiming that Rose had stolen Freeway's image, name, and likeness to create his successful rap career. I don't see the resemblance. I mean, one of them looks like they were selling cocaine for a decade and the other looks like they were the ones snorting it. You decide who's who. Anyway, apparently Freeway Rick was truly going for Rose's neck, specifically by suing the parent company of Rose's Maybach music label, Universal Music Group, and Slip and Slide Records, the indie label that had signed Rose before he blew up big time. And interestingly, Jay-Z himself was named specifically in this suit, apparently because he supposedly is the one that allowed Rose to keep using this name falsely when he signed him under the name Rick Ross to Def Jam Records in 2006, which even led to some intense speculation that the Jigga Man himself might be called to testify on the stand in court. And even worse, Freeway Ricky was at this point looking for a restraining order to try and prevent the release of Rose's new album Teflon Don. And to be fair, just being completely objective, you can see why Freeway Ricky kind of has a point. I mean, Rick Ross is literally his name. But unfortunately, the courts didn't agree, and Freeway's initial case was thrown out of court on a rather hilarious basis. Because Freeway Ricky was basically trying to claim that the fact that he was so well known in the drug trade as Rick Ross should constitute ownership of that name. Well, it turns out that the American justice system isn't really in the business of defending the copyright holdings of famous drug lords. And the colloquial brand name that you use when you're running around pushing illegal bricks isn't really the basis for a legal trademark. In fact, that's the exact same reason why my local crack dealer Spider had his case dismissed when he tried to sue Marvel. But apparently common sense did not prevail, and in 2011 Freeway Ricky hit Rose with yet another lawsuit, this time attempting to take his case to state level and suing Warner Music Group for partnering with Rick Ross's Maybach Music Group. Which, hey, for the record, Maybach Music Group, another business with a goddamn stolen name. But then again, to be fair, Rose claims that he's never even heard of the car manufacturer Maybach, and that it was really just a mispronunciation of one of his other high school nicknames, Gay Twat. Gay Twat music. It's not homophobia, it's just wordplay. Anywho, this reality-distorting lawsuit bounced around between a couple of different courts, like a game of Windows 3D pinball, until it finally got resolved at the end of 2013. And unfortunately for Freeway Ricky, being judged in Rose's favor. But out of that judgment, several salient details came out, which are actually pretty goddamn interesting if you care about copyright law. The lawsuit itself was pretty scathing against Rose, specifically bringing up his former past as a corrections officer being completely at odds with his persona as a successful drug dealer, as well as a pretty bold-faced claim that Rose's breakout single Every Day I'm Hustling was stolen from a catchphrase that Freeway Ricky had supposedly said a bunch of times in interviews about his life as a criminal. Yeah, that's true. In fact, that's the exact same legal basis that I used to sue Drake, because I'm pretty sure he stole the idea for his song Best I Ever Had from something I said after having a particularly good curry in the Oval Tandoori in 2006. Anywho, Freeway Ricky wasn't actually able to evidence any of these bold claims, something which Rose himself heavily rebuffed later in an interview.
My music storylines and concepts came from
right, I never knew that.
Yeah, Port of Miami, and that came from him having a connection to Port of Miami, and the Deeper Than Rap was something that he said, and then
And another salient detail that really backfired on Freeway Ricky was that alongside details about his own drug dealing past, he admitted to have turned snitch on some dirty cops. But Freeway Ricky must not have realized that exposing his dirty ring so publicly might also shatter his credibility as a drug kingpin. And it was this snitching allegation that actually gave Rose even more ammunition to insult and discredit Freeway Ricky's claims later. And so ultimately, it was December 30th, 2013 that Freeway Ricky officially lost his case in the appeals court. And although a trial court had initially allowed his claims to be heard, the judge Roger Borin eventually affirmed that this case would be completely dismissed on the basis of Rose being able to use that name under his First Amendment rights. And so apparently the creative expression of making music under the persona of Rick Ross, the drug-dealing rapper, is completely protected by the First Amendment right of free speech. The court basically ruled that while Rose did base his likeness on an existing famous drug dealer, he was not an imposter Rick Ross, as Freeway was trying to suggest. With the court interestingly pointing out the balance between the rights of a celebrity to fairly exploit their own image for profit against other individuals' right to their own free expression under the First Amendment. And of course, if you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I'm no stranger to pushing those limits of what truly is fair use. And I found it really interesting to hear what what the courts had to say about this. Though to be fair, Rose had a lot more to lose than me. Most of the time I'm just sat around wondering whether I'm going to get in trouble for using a copyrighted image of Lil Pump to make a fart joke. The court suggested that you can't just do a literal depiction or imitation of a celebrity for commercial gain, because that would trespass on their rights to publicity, unless you add significant transformative elements which then provide you protection under the First Amendment rights, with a focus on whether or not the artistic works are actually a good substitute for conventional depictions of that celebrity or celebrity memorabilia that copyright law exists to protect. Vis-a-vis, the question should always be, is what you're doing harming the market for the original work? So while my videos have always been in slightly murky waters, due to a heavy reliance on fair use and borrowed material, are of a journalistic nature, and in pretty much all cases, I don't show a clip or piece of content unless I'm providing analysis. Throwing on my video about how Rose bankrupted 50 Cent is hardly a direct substitute for throwing on one of 50's albums, meaning that his baseless takedown of that video about a year ago would hardly hold up in court. And so for all of Rose's on-stage capping that he's some kind of big-time drug dealer, that never really harmed the market for Freeway Ricky Ross to sell stupid t-shirts with his face on it or whatever other shit he was shilling. Hell, let's be real, the attention that was got from this lawsuit has probably been incredibly lucrative for Freeway Ricky. It seemed to have landed him dozens of high-profile interviews, and so to a certain extent I wouldn't be surprised to find out that this entire lawsuit was some sort of publicity stunt for Freeway Ricky Ross to raise his profile anyway. And being more specific, the judge made some fascinating comments about the nature of a celebrity likeness as artistic copyright, saying that while Rose's persona as a rap musician relied on Freeway's name and persona to a certain extent, Freeway's story was the raw materials that Rose's music career was synthesized with. But Freeway's specific drug dealing story itself wasn't the very sum and substance of Rose's work, which can basically be translated to, yes, I used your name, but you wasn't with me shooting in the gym. So essentially, Rose created a celebrity identity using the name Rick Ross, a drug dealer turned rapper. And according to the court, this Rick Ross persona that Rose created was so transformative it became his own expression, rather than the likeness of another celebrity. And this is specifically done through the work being produced being derived from the skill, creativity, and reputation of that artist, which triggers the First Amendment rights. So essentially, the value of Rose's work and musical catalog has nothing to do with Freeway Ricky the drug dealer, and people bought Rose's records not because he was some sort of Freeway Ricky Ross impersonator looking to profit off of somebody else's name, because he was a genuinely good rapper, nice with the mic, and a big fat cuddly dude that hip-hop hadn't seen before. Ironically, this lawsuit forced Rose to cop to some of his stories being fictional to the court, admitting that Rick Ross, his stage name, is essentially a drug-dealing persona, a frustrating admission considering how many credibility issues Rose has had. He spent years having his authenticity being questioned, with his past background as a corrections officer being dragged massively. I could do a whole video on Rose's past as a CO if you want, leave a comment if you do. But of course, any ammunition on those insults from Freeway's team was invalidated by the fact that he had to admit that he'd snitched on a bunch of dirty cops in the trial. This even led to a tense back and forth after the dust had settled on this lawsuit, when Freeway Ricky inexplicably reached out to Rose to try and rekindle things.
You know, after I lost, I said, you know what? Don't be a sore loser. Reach out to him again.
Yeah.
See if y'all can put some things together, because you still got game, you know?
Yeah.
I did that, and he went on the Breakfast Club and called me an informant. And
Freeway Rick Ross is doing a movie, and he said that he wanted to reach out to you to see if you guys could actually come together after battling legally for years.
That's weird.
And now he's saying, let's come together and
Ain't nothing to come together about.
He talked a little crazy. He was talking crazy at one point.
Throw your lawsuit on the grass. Leave it there. They don't mention the 40 people he testified on and sent to prison for life. You know, that's the information I seen because of lawsuits. That ain't in the, I don't hear none of that in everybody wearing the shirts. We don't do that where I'm from. And then you blame it on who used you. Nah, you told, it's called you testified.
And from there, Rose continued to point out that really throughout this entire process, Freeway Ricky was really just scrounging around looking for money, something which to his defense, he was not scared to admit.
Eventually I sued him, you know. I thought I could get some of Universal's money or Warner Brothers' money, one of them, you know. Thought I could tap into their bank account. You know, like he said on the radio, I was down on my luck.
Yeah.
You know, he said that on the radio. Oh yeah, he was down on his luck, and so he wanted to sue me. And yeah, it's kind of where it was, you know, I was.
And so after all of that, it turned out that Freeway Ricky was really just down on his luck and looking for a job with Rose all along.
What about a job, you know?
Yeah.
Like, man, you done did so much for me, man. I'm gonna go talk to your PO and talk about you going on tour with us, you know. You carry the drum machines, or the speakers, or the suitcases, or whatever.
Hell, kicking off an expensive 3-year legal battle, that's one hell of a way to apply for a job. And the delicious irony is, of course, the one final giant L that was handed to Freeway Ricky is the fact that in losing this case, Rose was entitled to attorney fees and costs. So I guess, after all was said and done, he paid the cost for someone else to be the boss.
It's your boy Trap Law Ross. Thanks for watching. Make sure you go and follow your boy at Trap Law Ross on Instagram, on Twitter, on motherfucking Twitch, baby. We're twitching, and I'll probably be streaming live immediately after this video. So come through on twitch.tv/Trap Law Ross. Come chat to your boy live, man. Come roast me. Come ask questions. Come watch me play Vice City. It's lit. I want to give a huge shout out to everybody that has been supporting on Patreon. Last month, we made sure that all of the Patreon money went to worthy causes that are helping fight against the ongoing health crisis that is a real piece of shit at the moment that I fucking hate. The health crisis is my op. We're gonna beat that bitch if you guys keep on supporting. So I appreciate everybody that showed support. I appreciate everybody that's holding it down and staying inside. That's Chris, Sebastian Andres, Laredo, Sean Anderson, Vampires for Hire, Roberto Rosas, Matthias Martin, Antonio Groza, Bash the Prince, Chris J, Claire Rodian, DJ Fred 100, man like Griffin Fuller, Big Henry Bryant, Jaden Cho, Jason Wyman, Lil Javier Gonzalez, Jessica Simmons, Kizzlebot, Naraj Shukla, Otaku VS, Penis Bag McPenis Face, yes, said it! Pyromancer, Vivi, and of course Wilson Psychedelic, as well as all of the other names that you see on screen right now. Go and support on patreon.com/TrapLawRoss. We're going to make that money go to worthy causes while this piece of shit health crisis is ravaging the planet like a fucking waste man. Oh, but if supporting on Patreon wasn't enough good for you, never fear, people. Head on over to traplaw.com where I've just dropped 2 pieces of new merch. I've got a lovely set of trap hoodies and tees, which I have ordered a sample of that I haven't even got yet. So if you order those and you get them before me, you got it for the low. You beat even your boy at getting them. And we have an excellent I'ma Stay Home tee designed by Chung Fame, the winner of my recent design competition. So I really appreciate that. You are a legend. And all of the proceeds from the sale of this t-shirt are going to go to the WHO's Emergency Response Fund, helping people all over the world overcome this fucking stupid crisis that really sucks, that I hate. I really hate. It sucks. It really sucks. I'm angry. So make sure that you support. Appreciate you for watching. Everybody that is in the gang, you mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Appreciate you to the world and fuck. Until next time, thanks for watching. Peace out.